In the last 300 years, humans have gone through 3 industrial revolutions, but none of them even came close to what's coming right now. For the first time in history, we are automating thinking itself. Every previous revolution created more jobs than it destroyed. Nobody knows that for sure on this one. AI is making everything so productive that the whole system built on debt is heading towards a complete reset. So today, I'll explain exactly how that reset will happen, and more importantly, what role XRP and digital assets are going to play in it. Before we can understand how this reset will happen, we need to understand what is actually causing it. How does money actually work? Well, most people think money is created by governments printing it, but that's not exactly how it works. In our current system, money is created when somebody takes out a loan. Personal loan, a mortgage, an auto loan, you name it. That money that you borrowed from the bank for that asset to purchase it or liability wasn't there. It did not exist before that loan. It was borrowed into existence. That means that the entire global economy runs on debt, and that is a big problem. When I say a big problem, how big really is the problem? Well, global debt hit $311 trillion in 2024. That's 235% of global GDP in that year. To put that into perspective, the entire world produces roughly $105 trillion in goods and services each year. And global debt is almost 3 times that amount. US debt alone sits at $39 trillion and is growing by $1.8 trillion every single year. The OECD sovereign bond debt just hit a record $61 trillion in 2025, up from $55 trillion the year before. And over 3.4 billion people are living in countries where the government spends more on debt just to service the interest than education and healthcare combined. And the whole crux of the system is built on the idea that more debt will be issued. Debt has to be repaid with interest, and to repay the interest, they need growth. They need GDP growth. If the economy slows down or stops growing, governments cannot service their debt, and banks and currencies collapse all over the world. We saw a preview of this in 2008 when the housing market collapsed. The entire global financial system nearly went under. The response was not what I would have thought they would have done, like, reduce fiscal responsibility. It was borrow more. They issued QE. They lowered interest rates to 0. And the US Federal Reserve was a part of all of that. They injected trillions of dollars into the system. And that worked for a little while. It kicked the can. We're here in 2026 after 2008. So it's worked for a while, but we're at the point of no return. You can't just continue to issue debt to solve a debt problem. But this is how the system was designed. It wasn't always this way, though. Before 1971, the US dollar was actually backed by gold. And under the Bretton Woods Agreement that was established in 1944, every single dollar in circulation had to be backed by a fixed amount of gold that was held in Fort Knox. And you could walk into the bank and exchange your dollars for gold at a fixed rate. That kept money creation constrained. And that's why the Fed's interest rate that they try to target is 2%, because that's about the amount of gold that you can mine per year. Well, at least it was at the time. And it kept it where you couldn't borrow indefinitely, because gold supply was limited. It only grew at a certain rate. But in August of 1971, when Nixon said that he was pausing redemptions on the gold window, here we are, a long time later, still paused, the dollar became backed by nothing except a promise from the US government and economic growth. And then a couple years later, they went into the Middle East, and then, we had the birth of the petrodollar, which is the system that's ending right now. But with every major currency in the world, it was pegged to the dollar, and there's now free-floating exchange rates based on a lot of different components that make that shift, right? When you swap from one currency to another, there's always these exchange rates, but nothing is actually pegged. It's all free-floating. So in that moment, when he removed that peg, money actually became theoretically unlimited. And for more than 50 years, that system has worked because the global economy has kept growing. We've had more people. But now we're in a world where people are retiring, people are aging out, and GDP is slowing because there's not as many people to produce things. And many people are now relying on those governments that promise them all these incentives to support them in retirement. So how do we proceed from here? Well, because of that ceiling, AI is here, and it's going to produce massive amounts of GDP in order to be able to bridge the gap. But that system has a ceiling, and AI is about to expose that ceiling of this debt-based system. And the thing is, contrary to what most people believe, AI doesn't just threaten jobs, it threatens the fundamental assumptions that a debt-based system is dependent upon. Goldman Sachs estimates that AI will raise labor productivity by 15% when fully adopted across developed markets. I think it's actually going to be a lot more than that. McKinsey also says that AI technology, not future versions, just today's, could automate 57% of the current US work hours. That's a lot of people working a lot less. And there have been many many other people that have talked about things. The World Economic Forum came out and projects that 92 million jobs will be displaced by 2030 and 170 million new ones will be created, which is a net positive on paper. But the timing, there's a mismatch there, right? We're going to have to bridge the gap with something, and that's the real problem. When the jobs disappear, that's going to happen fast. And the jobs that are going to replace them are going to take a long time to emerge. We saw this similarly with the internet boom. Amazon's already eliminated 14,000 corporate roles, citing AI that enabled that leaner structure. And we're seeing job losses across the board. 55,000 jobs were lost here in the last year in 2025, and those were attributed to the growth of AI at these large corporations. We've also seen other people do it, like Block and Workday, which also cut 8.5% of its entire workforce to reallocate resources toward their AI investments. So this is happening, like, right now. And we've been here before. Between 1760 and 1840, the Industrial Revolution mechanized physical labor at scale that nobody had ever seen up to that point. Weavers who had worked by hand for generations were replaced with machines overnight. Riots broke out, people smashed things in England, unemployment spiked, wages collapsed for the entire category of workers. And then, over decades, a new economy emerged. Factories created the new middle class living standard, which actually raised living standards dramatically. But it took some time. The transition was brutal, but the destination was extraordinary. And I think that the same is going to happen with AI. The Industrial Revolution replaced physical labor, or people's, actual work with their hands, while AI is going to replace cognitive labor. The difference is the Industrial Revolution replaced physical labor with machines over muscles. And AI is replacing cognitive labor, thinking, analyzing, writing, coding, designing. For the first time, the thing being automated is the thing humans thought made them irreplaceable. A steam engine couldn't diagnose diseases. AI can. And in a debt-based system, it requires inflation to function. Inflation makes old debt cheaper to repay. So if I borrow a bunch of money today and that same currency is worth less later, I'm actually able to repay that debt cheaper with that inflated value of that money. And that's how this has worked. But AI is deflationary. It makes goods and services cheaper to produce and cheaper to buy. When production costs fall, prices should go with them. And as prices fall across an economy, revenues also go down. When revenues fall, debt becomes harder to service, not easier. The deflationary AI that's going to be hitting the inflationary debt system is a structural collision, and something is going to have to give. I think, and this is going to be controversial, but the solution to bridge the gap here is probably going to be universal basic income. And we've heard Elon talk about high universal basic income. I know that there's some differing opinions on this out here, but I'm hopeful in this video you're going to understand why that's not going to be per capita that's going to produce this tax. Normally people would think, I'm going to have to work and I'm going to pay more taxes, and then it's going to get doled out to people that don't work or don't provide value. The AI agents and the humanoid robots and the things that are coming are going to replace the human labor. And that's a good and bad thing, because now that's going to produce significantly greater GDP. They don't get sick. They, don't call in. You don't have to provide them benefits. It's cheaper to employ after the front end expenses. And because of that, GDP growth is going to be actually much greater than it would be if it was just defined per capita. So getting back to UBI, this isn't a new thing, right? People have tried it plenty of times before and it didn't work. There's been some things where it worked okay, and we'll get into those as well. But the idea is about 500 years old. Universal basic income is not a new idea. Thomas More described a guaranteed income in his book Utopia in 1560, and Thomas Paine proposed it in 1797 in his pamphlet, arguing that every person deserved a share of the Earth's natural resources. The idea has existed for a long time, and it has never actually just, worked out the way that people think that it should have. It's never been successfully implemented at scale anywhere in the world, but it hasn't been for a lack of trying. In 1969, President Nixon proposed a negative income tax to Congress. Every American family below a certain income threshold would receive a guaranteed government payment. But it never passed. The left said it wasn't generous enough. The right said it was disincentivized work. And so, it was kind of dead on arrival. We also saw in the 1970s in Canada, they ran an experiment called Mindcomb, and families received guaranteed income regardless of their employment. And results were positive. Hospitalization dropped, school completion rose, and then the government changed in 1979 and the program was canceled. The data sat in boxes for 30 years before researchers actually found it. Finland has also done this before. They gave 2,000 unemployed people 560 euros per month from 2017 to 2018. Stress reduced, employment actually was unchanged, and the program was eventually abandoned due to political resistance. The killer was only 35% of the Finland's population supported it when they found out that they were going to have to pay more taxes in order to fund it. Switzerland also held a national referendum on basic income in 2016, but it was rejected, 76.9% to 23.1%. So every time this has been proposed in government, there have been a few times where it's actually gotten through, and there is a net social benefit, but but it's at the disadvantage of taxpayers and people actually producing the GDP in the economy. And so because of that friction, it's never going to work in the way that our paradigm exists today. We're going to have automated solutions and these technologies that supplement this income that can then be distributed. So there's all the times that it didn't work, but there are a few that actually did. The Alaska Permanent Fund was established in 1976, and every year Alaska takes a portion of its oil revenue and distributes it equally to every single resident. Every man, woman, and child receives a check. In 2023, that dividend was $1,312 per person. Zero political resistance, and nobody is being taxed. The money comes from a productive asset that the state owns. Norway took this a little bit further. Their government pension fund holds $1.7 trillion built entirely from oil and investment revenue. The UAE, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, has $1 trillion that they make distributions out of. Saudi Arabia has a public investment fund that manages $925 billion that does the same. Singapore and a few others also have made this work because of the natural resources in their sovereign area that they, take profits from, that they then redistribute to the population. Every single one of these that has been successful distributes revenue from a real productive asset. But oil is finite and geographically dependent. For the first time in history, the productive asset generating economic surplus is going to be global, digital, and programmable. AI generates economic output that doesn't belong to one government or geography. A software company in Singapore, a logistics AI in Germany, and a medical diagnosing model in Kenya all generate real economic value. But to distribute that value at a global scale, you need some infrastructure that didn't exist until now. And that infrastructure is blockchain and digital assets, or stablecoins, or, again, everybody's favorite term, a CBDC. But before I get into the blockchain and how it's the missing piece for this entire thing, I want you to stay ahead of the curve on these new markets. So go check out the Beyond Broke Mastermind. It's in the links below. We'll see you inside. And if you do need help setting up your estate, mitigating taxes, and all the other fun stuff that comes along with making a bunch of money in crypto, you can always reach out to us at digitalfamilyoffice.io. All right, so let's get back to it. As I said, blockchain might be the solution for all of these UBI problems. Tokenization means converting ownership of real-world assets into a digital token that's represented on a blockchain, a share of a stock, a government bond, a piece of real estate. We could record a portion of the AI-generated revenue on-chain on a public ledger that anybody could verify, and use a smart contract that's an agreement that executes automatically when conditions are met. No intermediaries. If condition A is true, it executes, and action B is taken automatically. This is programmable money, money that distributes itself based on rules written into code. This is exactly what the Alaskan model would have needed, but couldn't have. A distribution mechanism that requires no government, no tax to be collected, and is redistributable. And the infrastructure is already operational. It just hasn't been adopted yet for this application. So instead of people getting checks in the mail, it would just be deposited directly into your checking account. The XRPL would work great for this. So here's where XRP enters the conversation. Because when you look at what the next neutral reserve asset needs to be, XRP is one of the few assets that is currently in position to take this spot. No central controlling entity. It provides instant settlement. It's programmable with smart contracts and has integrations for that. It's globally accessible regardless of geography, and it's legally recognized across multiple jurisdictions as financial infrastructure or currency. Now, that's not to say that it'll be the XRP that's distributed, but that could be the asset that each one of these countries holds that produces some of this additional revenue alongside the AI GDP that's generated beyond just the taxes that they would have to take from people. So as it sits today, no single entity controls XRP and the network. Ripple manages 3 validators on the network. The rest of the 35 UNL validators sit with other people. So it is actually decentralized, and it settles in 3 to 5 seconds. And because of Ripple, this stuff is regulated in over 75 global jurisdictions, and it's operating in 55 of those countries. We got legal clarity for XRP in 2023, and it's already functioning as a bridge asset in cross-border payments through ODL corridors. So how do we tie all this together? Well, I think you're going to see an agentic economy, and the production of this is going to be not quite free. There's definitely some infrastructure cost and upfront setup, and the government might subsidize a portion of that. You're already seeing them, subsidizing data centers and other energy and other components that will allow this to work at scale. But what it does is it creates an infinite feedback loop where there's no cap on GDP. We just had Elon Musk come out the other day and say that he believes that a 10x in global GDP over the next 10 years is conservative. And I would agree with him. I think that there's going to be huge amounts of economic output because of these progressive technologies all converging at the same time. And blockchain and digital assets are the distribution mechanism for this. So the additional output of each nation or geography could then be doled out to people to be able to bring up their standard of income. And I don't think this is going to be a dystopian world. Like I mentioned before, in the applications where this did work for a little while, people's quality of life actually rose. And people people still want to work. They still want to have purpose. They want to have meaning. Now, there's always going to be a portion of the population that does not care and they will sit at home in their underwear and play video games. I'm not here to debate that, but I don't think it's going to disincentivize people. People want to provide value. They want to be productive in society. And if you have a solid base, you can then focus on your passions. You can focus on the things that you, as a single mother working 3 jobs just to provide for your kids, you don't have time to go after a singing career. You don't have to have time to paint things or go after your real interests or what your real gifts are. So I think this is going to be another renaissance period with all of this, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Am I right? Am I wrong? Is this crazy? Do you think that this could never work? I'd love to hear what you guys think. And if you want to stay ahead of the curve, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.